My name is Marjorie Vance, 29 years old. The glow of my phone lit up on the polished oak table where I sat, surrounded by zoning maps and blueprints. I was supposed to be focused on the city's new redevelopment proposals, but the text that slid across my screen shattered every ounce of concentration. Sold your worthless building for $200,000. Family needs the money more than you. I blinked once, twice, 3 times, reading the words over and over as if repetition would alter their meaning. No greeting, no question mark, no apology, just a demargeration, arrogant and final. The sender was my older brother Marcus. I set the phone face down on the table, forcing my hand to steady even as a cold rush spread across my chest. The Morrison Building. He was talking about the Morrison Building, the one I'd purchased 6 years earlier when that block of downtown was still full of shuttered shops and boarded windows. Back then, my own parents had shaken their heads, whispering that I was throwing money into a dead street. Now it was worth over $8.5 million. Marcus, of course, wouldn't know that. None of them would. To my family, I was still Marjorie, the one who never went to law school, or Marjorie. The one who lived in a small apartment and drove a sensible car. The quiet one, the one who hadn't married rich, hadn't sought the spotlight, hadn't demanded their approval. They didn't know that the apartment was a penthouse I owned outright, or that my property management job had long since become the management of my own steadily growing portfolio. 17 buildings across the city, each one producing the kind of income my family couldn't even imagine. But they didn't need to know. I'd built my empire in silence because I'd learned something early in my family. Visibility mattered more than reality. Marcus's law degree from a prestigious university, Victoria's marriage to a tech executive, Dad's golf membership at the country club, these were their measures of success. Quiet success hidden behind unassuming choices was invisible to them, which was exactly how I preferred it until now. The meeting adjourned at 4:15 p.m., and I allowed the hum of chatter around me to fade into nothing as I checked my phone again. 3 more texts from Marcus, each more smug than the last. Already deposited this check. Don't be mad. You know the firm needs the capital. You should thank me for getting $200K for that dump. My hands itched to crush the phone in my palm. Instead, I slipped it into my bag, rose smoothly, and smiled at a colleague who asked if I'd be attending the post-meeting drinks. Not tonight, I murmured. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is too clean, too temporary. What I felt was something heavier, darker, a slow burn in the pit of my stomach. In the elevator, I dialed Tom, my attorney. He picked up on the second ring. Marjorie, what's wrong? My brother just sold one of my properties without my consent, I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. The Morrison Building. There was a sharp inhale on the other end, the sound of papers being shuffled. That's the $8 million property. 8.5. He sold it for how much? 200,000. A pause. Then Tom's voice, low and deliberate. That's fraud. Forgery. Grand theft, depending on how he executed the sale. Marjorie, this is... I know exactly what it is, I interrupted. I'm not calling to ask if it's serious. I'm calling to tell you to start the process. Contact the buyer, file the paperwork, report the fraudulent sale. I want this handled by the book. Understood, Tom said. I'll need to involve the DA's office. And Marjorie, this isn't just a civil matter. Your brother could face prison. I stared at my reflection in the elevator's polished steel, at the faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Then he should have thought about that before he stole from me. The line went quiet for a moment. Then I'll get started. I hung up, stepped into the lobby, and drew a deep breath. The air was sharp with autumn, tinged with the scent of roasting chestnuts from the vendor outside. For a fleeting second, I wanted to laugh because, of course, this had to happen on a Tuesday. Family dinner night. Every Tuesday without fail, I drove to my parents' house where Mom served pot roast and Dad droned on about taxes. Marcus usually held court at the head of the table, glass of whiskey in hand, while Victoria rolled her eyes at my boring little stories. Tonight it would be different. On the drive across town, my mind wandered. Not to anger, not to betrayal, but to memory. I remembered being 12, saving scraps of allowance to buy a book on real estate from a second-hand shop. I remembered showing Marcus the highlighted passages about property cycles, only for him to laugh and call me a wannabe landlord. I remembered Dad's proud face at Marcus's law school graduation, the speech he gave about his son being the future of the family name, while I stood in the crowd invisible. They'd all chosen not to see me, and Marcus had chosen to steal from me, confident I had nothing worth stealing. The Morrison Building loomed in my mind as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Marcus's BMW was sprawled arrogantly across two spaces, Victoria's husband Trevor's Tesla gleaming beside it. I parked my unassuming Toyota in the street where it blended with the neighbors' cars. Inside, the familiar smell of roast beef and onions wrapped around me like a memory I no longer belonged to. Mom's voice called from the kitchen. Cheerful, unknowing Marjorie. You're here, Marcus just told us the most wonderful news. I set my purse on the entry table, my jaw tightening. Tonight there would be no wonderful news. Tonight they would finally learn who I really was. The dining room smelled like buttered rolls and freshly poured scotch. My father was already laughing when I walked in, his heavy hand gripping Marcus's shoulder. Marcus sat in Dad's usual seat at the head of the table, his glass raised in a toast, as if he were king of the evening. His cheeks were flushed, the smirk on his face so wide it made my stomach tighten. There she is, he announced the moment I stepped inside. The woman of the hour. My mother bustled from the kitchen apron, tied neatly over her blouse. Marjorie, darling, isn't it wonderful? Marcus has finally helped you sell that old place. I paused in the doorway, the words hanging between us like smoke. Has he? Victoria, my older sister, swirled her wine glass with a knowing smirk. Her husband, Trevor, sat beside her, stiff-backed and visibly uncomfortable. You should be thanking him, Marjorie. That building was just sitting there, wasting away. I slid into a chair without answering, watching Marcus lean back with the confidence of a man who thought the world was built for him. Johnson Properties wanted to lowball you at 150, he declared proudly. But I fought for you, got you 200. He lifted his glass again as if his fraud deserved applause. That's my boy, Dad said warmly. Natural negotiator, always looking out for his little sister. Mom nodded, beaming, as though Marcus had pulled off a miracle. You could use that money, Marjorie. Finally buy yourself a real home, something respectable, with a yard. My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from how easily they wrote my story for me. In their eyes, I was still small, still the child who hadn't lived up to their gilded standards. I folded my hands neatly on the table. So you deposited the check, Marcus. Of course, he grinned. Right into the firm's account. You'll thank me later. It's an investment for the family. Victoria leaned forward, her voice syrupy sweet. Honestly, Marjorie, it's so generous of him. You were never really the owner anyway. You just managed it. Isn't that right? Something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. The years of invisibility. The jokes about my little apartment. The way they dismissed my career as if I were a child playing at business. Managed it, I repeated softly. Yes, Victoria said, exchanging a glance with Marcus. You didn't own it. You just worked there. Trevor shifted in his seat, brow furrowing. Actually, I thought Marjorie once mentioned. Marcus cut him off with a wave of his hand. Details, details. She was a caretaker, not an owner, and now she's sitting on 200 grand. She never would have seen otherwise. Dad chuckled, sipping his drink. Family taking care of family. That's what matters. I sat very still, listening to the sound of ice clinking in glasses, the hum of false celebration. Then I looked at each of them, Marcus basking in his stolen triumph, Victoria smirking like a queen on her throne, my parents glowing with misplaced pride. And I realized something that made my skin prickle. Not one of them expected me to protest. Not one of them thought I had the power to. I leaned forward, folding my napkin slowly, deliberately. My voice was quiet, but carried across the table. You're all wrong. The room stilled. What do you mean, Dad asked, frowning. I wasn't managing that building for someone else. I bought it. 6 years ago. Cash. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. Marjorie, don't be ridiculous. I met her eyes without flinching. Do you want to see the deed? Silence. Marcus's grin faltered. You're lying, he said flatly. There's no way. I let the pause linger, savoring the way the air thickened. The Morrison building isn't the only property I own. I have 17 across this city. 17. My words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. The table froze. Mom's hand trembled as she set down her serving spoon. Dad blinked, as if I had spoken a foreign language. Victoria stared at me, lips parted, the color draining from her face. And Marcus laughed, but the sound was thin, cracking around the edges. 17, he scoffed. That's impossible. I tilted my head, a small smile playing at my lips. Is it? The silence that followed wasn't just disbelief. It was the dawning recognition that for the first time in their lives, they had no idea who I really was. And that realization terrified them. The silence at the table pressed down like a weight. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the sound of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed muffled, as if the house itself were holding its breath. 17. The word hung there, stretching the space between us. Victoria broke first, a scoff slipping out brittle and forced. Marjorie, you can't expect us to believe this nonsense. 17 buildings, please. You barely make enough to keep your little car running. My Toyota runs fine, I said calmly. And I bought it outright. No debt. Marcus leaned forward, his bravado cracking but still present like paint peeling from rotted wood. You're bluffing. You've been a property manager, 10 years? Making 45 grand a year. You couldn't buy a parking space, let alone. I bought the Morrison building in 2019. I interrupted. 2.3 million. Cash. No mortgage, no partners. Dad's glass clattered against the table. 2 million. His voice thundered in disbelief. Where would you get that kind of money? I let my gaze linger on him, 1,000 unspoken memories between us. His speeches about Marcus, his dismissals of me, the way he once said Marjorie doesn't have the ambition for big things. You never asked what I did with my time, I said softly. You just assumed I had nothing worth noticing. My mind flicked back unbidden but sharp to that spring day 6 years ago. I had stood in front of the Morrison building when the paint was still peeling and the for sale sign was faded from rain. The realtor had looked me up and down, unimpressed, and asked if I was sure I wanted to tour it. Most buyers don't see potential in this area, he'd said. But I had seen more than bricks and boarded windows. I'd seen a future, a corridor waiting to bloom. I remembered the rush of signing that cashier's check, the ache in my hand from clutching the pen too tightly, the thrill of risk pounding in my veins. That moment had been mine alone. No applause, no champagne, just me, a deed, and the quiet certainty that I had chosen well. Now, sitting at my parents' dinner table, I let them feel the weight of that truth. Marcus barked a laugh, though his eyes darted nervously. This is insane. You're lying. If you owned millions in property, we'd know. You wouldn't be living in some shoebox apartment. It's a penthouse, I replied evenly. 2,400 square feet. Paid off. I own the building. Mom sank into a chair, her face pale. Marjorie. Sweetheart, you're not well. You've been working too hard. Maybe you're confused. I smiled faintly. Confused enough to pay property taxes, collect rent, sign contracts. Because I do all three. Every month. Victoria shook her head, reaching for her wine again. This is absurd. She's making it up. People like us would have noticed if she was some secret tycoon. Trevor, quiet until now, cleared his throat. His eyes flicked to mine. I don't think she's lying. Everyone turned to him. He shifted in his chair. Marjorie mentioned investments years ago. I thought she was exaggerating, but the way she's speaking now, it fits. Honestly, she sounds like half the clients I deal with at the firm. Marcus's jaw tightened. So you're taking her side now? Trevor hesitated, then said firmly, I'm saying maybe you shouldn't dismiss her so quickly. The room buzzed with unease. My family, who had always been so sure of their place above me, were suddenly confronted with the idea that they didn't know me at all. And then, as if to punctuate the moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Tom. Excuse me, I murmured, stepping into the kitchen. Marjorie, Tom said, without preamble, his voice clipped and urgent. It's worse than we thought. I gripped the counter, the cool granite grounding me. How bad? The sale went through a company called Quick Close Solutions. Shady reputation. They cut corners. But here's the thing. They had paperwork, power of attorney, a deed, both in your name. My stomach turned cold. Forged. Almost certainly, and convincing too. The title company is already panicking. They could lose their license over this. Johnson Properties is furious. They're threatening to sue your brother, the title company, and possibly you, if this doesn't get fixed immediately. My hand tightened around the phone, and the money, deposited into Marcus's firm account this morning. I checked the balance before the transfer. He had $47,000 left. Insolvent. He needed this to survive. My throat closed. He was desperate. Yes, Tom said. But desperation doesn't erase felony charges. Fraud, forgery, grand theft. The DA will almost certainly prosecute. I closed my eyes. For a long moment, I let the words settle heavy as stones. Do what you need to do, I said quietly. No shortcuts. Handle it by the book. When I walked back into the dining room, their laughter had faded. My family sat stiffly watching me as if I carried a live weapon in my hand. I slipped my phone into my pocket and sat down slowly, letting them feel the tension stretch. That was my attorney, I said. My voice was soft, but the words hit like a hammer. He's filed a police report. Fraud, forgery, grand theft. Marcus's face drained of color. You're bluffing, he whispered. I met his eyes unflinching. Try me. The words settled over the table like ash after a fire. Fraud? Forgery? Grand theft? Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Marjorie, don't talk like that, she pleaded, voice trembling. This is a family matter. We don't need lawyers or police involved. We can sort it out. Dad's jaw was tight, his voice hard. You don't drag your own brother into court. That's not how families work. Families don't steal from each other, I replied. My tone was quiet, steady, the kind of calm that cuts deeper than shouting. Victoria's lips curled. You're exaggerating. Marcus was just helping. You act like he's some criminal. He is, I said sharply, cutting her off. He forged my name. He sold my building without consent. That's not helping. That's theft. The room went still. Only Marcus shifted, his bravado visibly crumbling. You can't prove. My phone buzzed again on the table, its vibration rattling against the wood. The screen lit up with Tom's name, but I ignored it. I already knew. Marcus, I said, folding my hands neatly in my lap. How exactly did you execute the sale? Did you file the deed yourself? Forge the power of attorney? Or did you have someone help? He swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing. I'm a lawyer, Marjorie. I know how these things work. I didn't forge anything. Then what did you do? Details. He waved his hand, but the gesture was weak. I handled the paperwork, that's all. Trevor cleared his throat, his unease filling the silence. If there was paperwork, Marjorie, your attorney will find it. Already has, I said. And the title company is cooperating. They know what Marcus did. They've handed over everything. Marcus's face drained of color. Victoria leaned forward, her voice suddenly sharp. You can't ruin your own brother like this. Think about the family name. The family name, I almost laughed. Marcus ruined himself. I'm not the one who forged documents. Marcus's phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, a third time. Answer it, I said. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Hello? We all sat in silence as his expression shifted from irritation to confusion, then to dread. No, he stammered. That's not possible. She doesn't own. His eyes flicked to me, wide, desperate. What do you mean, 8.5 million? It's just an old building. The voice on the other end grew louder. I could hear the attorney's rage echoing faintly through the phone. Marcus's hand shook so badly he nearly dropped it. Finally, he lowered the device, face ashen. His lips parted, but no words came. That was Johnson Properties, I said for him. They're suing you for fraudulent representation. They want their $200,000 back immediately plus damages. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Trevor swore under his breath. They're saying this is the biggest fraud of the year, I added, my voice steady. And they're not wrong. As if on cue, Victoria's phone lit up. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. Oh my God, she whispered. Marcus, you're trending. Marcus's head snapped toward her. What? She turned the screen so we could all see. Headlines scrolled in bold letters. Local attorney accused of 8.5 million property fraud. Johnson Properties blasts. Fraudulent sale on social media. Dad's face turned crimson. This is fixable, he barked. We'll hire a better lawyer. Keep it quiet. Settle. With what money, I asked. My tone was sharp now, cutting through his denial. Marcus's firm is already drowning in debt. He doesn't have the capital. You refinanced your house to help him once, remember. You want to mortgage it again for him to cover fraud. Mom covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Please, this can't be happening. It is, I said flatly. The doorbell rang. We all froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Dad stormed toward the entryway, muttering, It's probably a mistake. Just a mistake. But when the voices filtered through low, firm, unmistakably authoritative, I knew it wasn't. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the dining room. The taller one's gaze swept the table before settling on Marcus. Marcus Vance. Marcus rose slowly, his face pale, his hands trembling. Yes. The officer nodded. We have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include fraud, forgery, and grand theft. You have the right to remain silent. Mom screamed. Dad shouted. Victoria pressed a hand to her mouth. And Marcus looked straight at me, eyes wide as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound of the handcuffs was louder than it should have been. Metal against metal, final and cold. Mom collapsed into his chair, her apron twisted in her hands, as though she could wring reality back into shape. Dad lunged forward, trying to wedge himself between Marcus and the officers. This is a mistake, he barked. You can't just haul a man off from his family dinner. He's a lawyer, for God's sake. The taller officer didn't flinch. Sir, step back. He's my son. Step back. Dad froze, his chest heaving. Victoria was crying now, her mascara smudged in streaks down her cheeks. This is insane, she whispered. Marjorie, do something. I stayed seated. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but my pulse throbbed at my temples. I should have felt triumph, vindication. Instead, all I felt was the dull weight of inevitability. Marcus turned his head toward me as they led him toward the door. His face, usually so smug, was stripped bare. He looked younger suddenly, like the boy I used to build Lego towers, with the boy who once promised he'd protect me forever. His voice cracked. Marjorie, I'm your brother. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. I know. I let my words cut clean. That's what makes this so disappointing. The officers guided him out, his head bowed, his hands bound. The slam of the door behind them echoed through the house like a gunshot. Silence fell, then chaos. Mom's wails filled the room, raw and jagged. Dad stormed back in red face, shouting at me about betrayal, about loyalty, about family. Victoria shoved her chair back and pointed at me, her hand trembling. You've destroyed him. You've destroyed all of us. Through it all, I sat still, letting their anger crash against me like waves against stone. It wasn't until Trevor quietly touched my shoulder that I moved. His voice was low, meant only for me. Can we talk? We slipped into the kitchen, the din of sobs and shouting muffled by the door. Trevor's face was pale, his hands jammed into his pockets. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice tight. Victoria and we co-signed Marcus's office lease. If his firm goes under, we're responsible. $8,000 a month. For 3 years. We can't... He broke off, dragging a hand down his face. We'll drown. I studied him for a long moment. His worry wasn't selfish, it was survival. For the first time, someone in my family was speaking to me without condescension, without dismissal. Don't panic, I said evenly. His eyes flicked to mine, desperate. What do you mean? The building Marcus leased his office in, I replied slowly. Who do you think owns it? Trevor blinked. You. I allowed myself a small smile. I can terminate his lease for cause. Criminal charges void contracts. You and Victoria won't be liable. For a second, he just stared at me. Then his shoulders sagged, relief flooding his expression. Why would you do that? After everything. Because you didn't steal from me, I said simply. And Victoria, I hesitated, choosing my words. She'll already be paying in other ways. She doesn't need financial ruin on top of it. Trevor's expression shifted, relief, giving way to something like respect. You're not what I expected, Marjorie. No one ever expects the quiet one, I said softly, until it's too late. Before he could reply, my phone buzzed again. Tom. I answered, my voice low. What now? Marjorie, he said grimly. The fallout's accelerating. The bank froze Marcus's account. Creditors are lining up, his firm. Tom paused. It's collapsing. Fast. I closed my eyes, the weight of inevitability pressing down. Marcus hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built his empire on sand, and the tide was coming in. Let it fall, I whispered. When I returned to the dining room, the house was still chaos. Mom sobbing. Dad pacing Victoria, glaring daggers at me. But none of it mattered. Because Marcus's empire was already gone. And he didn't even know how deep the ruin went yet. By the time I returned home that night, the calls had already started. Dad's voice filled my voicemail, angry, then pleading, then angry again. We'll get a lawyer. We'll fix this. You can't let your brother go to prison over a misunderstanding. Marjorie, call me back. Victoria's text came in rapid bursts, alternating between fury and desperation. You've ruined us. You've humiliated us. Trevor says we're on the hook for the lease. Do something, please. I can't breathe. Mom sent only one message, simple and devastating. How could you do this to your brother? I turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine. The city lights glittered outside my penthouse window, cold and indifferent. They didn't understand. Not yet. The next morning, Tom called again. His tone was clipped, but beneath it was a current of disbelief. Marjorie, it's a mess. Your father's house. He's refinanced it 3 times already. Almost no equity left. Victoria and Trevor co-signed Marcus's office lease. If it defaults, they'll drown. I stared at my reflection in the glass window, the skyline stretching behind me. And Marcus, dead in the water, creditors circling. His 2 clients already pulled out. It's only a matter of time before the bar association moves in. Good, I said softly. That night, instead of going straight home, I drove to the Morrison building. My building. The street was alive now, buzzing with neon signs and late-night restaurants, a far cry from the boarded-up ghost block I'd first walked years ago. The building stood proud in the center, its glass reflecting the city like a mirror. I slipped inside. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish, the marble gleaming under soft lights. The security guard nodded respectfully. He knew me not as a tenant, but as the owner. I rode the elevator to the top floor and stepped onto the terrace. From here, I could see the city stretching wide and endless, my other buildings scattered across the skyline like chess pieces I'd been quietly moving for years. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up running numbers by hand, the times I'd eaten ramen to save money while Marcus bought $1,000 suits, the way Dad once patted my shoulder and said, "At least you're trying, sweetheart," as if my work was a hobby. And now the empire I'd built in silence was the very ground Marcus had tried to steal, and the weight of his collapse was dragging the rest of them down with him. When I returned to my apartment, the news was already breaking wider. Victoria had texted again this time, only a screenshot. Local attorney arrested for $8.5 million fraud, splashed across the evening news ticker. A moment later, Tom called. "It's spreading fast," he said. "Social media blogs, now mainstream outlets. Real estate, weekly, legal times. They're calling it one of the biggest property fraud cases in the state this decade." I sipped my wine, watching the city lights dance across the glass. "So it's public now?" "Very," Tom confirmed. "Your family's going to feel the pressure, Marcus especially. His reputation is finished." "Good," I repeated. Tom hesitated. "Marjorie, you need to prepare yourself. This isn't just going to stay local." My phone buzzed again, a new notification. I glanced at the headline on the lock screen and my breath caught. Wall Street Journal, Midwest Real Estate Fraud Rocks Legal Community. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in court, his once tailored suits traded for something wrinkled and ill-fitting. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, shoulders hunched, his hands trembling as the judge listed the charges. Fraud, forgery, grand theft. The DA offered him a deal, 5 years probation, full restitution to Johnson Properties, and permanent disbarment. The alternative was prison. Marcus swallowed hard and took the deal. The judge's gavel cracked down. Restitution set at $8.5 million plus damages. Payment to commence immediately. Failure to comply will result in incarceration. I sat in the back of the courtroom, my hands folded neatly, watching the words carve themselves into Marcus's future like stone. He couldn't pay. Dad couldn't. Victoria and Trevor certainly couldn't. It was impossible, and that was the point. That night, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But the desperation in the third voicemail, Dad's voice breaking, finally pushed me to pick up. "Marjorie," he said, his tone ragged, "I'm begging you, as your father, please, help him." Help him how my voice was cold, but inside my chest tightened. "Pay the restitution. You have the money. You could make this go away." I stared out my window at the city skyline, at the buildings I had built one by one, brick by brick, while he praised Marcus's every stumble as brilliance. "Why would I asked softly. "Because he's your brother," Dad's voice rose, cracking. "Because we're family. Because you can. What kind of person lets their own blood rot when they could stop it?" My lips tightened. "He stole from me. He forged my name. He committed fraud because he thought I was insignificant. Because you all thought I was insignificant. We never—" "You did," I snapped. The dam broke, years of silence rushing out. Every family dinner, every holiday, every gathering. Marcus, the successful lawyer. Victoria, the perfect wife. And Marjorie, the disappointment. Marjorie with her little job. Marjorie with her little apartment. Marjorie who was never enough. Memories clawed up from the past. Christmas dinners, where Marcus held the spotlight, Dad. Telling relatives about Victoria's new house while I sat in silence. The night I brought home an award from work, and Mom set it aside to talk about Marcus's new office furniture. "Do you remember," I whispered, my voice shaking now, "when I won that statewide essay competition in high school? Do you remember what you told me?" Dad was silent. "You said, 'It's nice, Marjorie, but Marcus just got accepted into debate finals.' That's the kind of achievement that matters." The silence stretched heavy and suffocating. I steadied my breath, forcing steel back into my voice. I worked for this dad. Every building, every investment, every dollar. I did it alone because none of you believed I could. And the first chance Marcus had to profit from my work, he stole it, without hesitation. Because in his mind, I was nobody. "If you pay the restitution," Dad said desperately, "he won't go to jail." "If I pay the restitution," I replied, each word like a blade, "he learns nothing." I hung up. The click of the receiver echoed louder than his pleas. The hearing was merciless. Marcus stood in front of the judge like a shadow of the man who once bragged about mahogany desks and leather chairs. His law license had been stripped, his firm dissolved. Johnson Properties demanded every penny, and when the judge calculated the restitution, $8.5 million at $2,500 a month, the math was cruel. It would take him over 280 years to pay it off. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Marcus swayed on his feet as if the weight of those centuries had fallen on his shoulders all at once. When the gavel fell, he looked older than Dad. 6 months later, he was working an entry-level job at a property management company, earning $42,000 a year, managing buildings for someone else. The irony didn't escape me. Mom called the moment she found out. Her voice was sharp, cutting her grief, transmuted into venom. "Are you happy now? Your brother overqualified, barely making enough to live. This is what you wanted." I closed my eyes, her words burning. "I worked that exact job for years, Mom. You all dismissed it as nothing. Now that Marcus is doing it suddenly, it's a tragedy." "That was different," she snapped. "How?" She didn't answer. She hung up. I let the silence fill the room. Weeks passed before the next unexpected call. This time it was Victoria. She invited me to lunch, something she hadn't done in years. We met at a cafe downtown just 2 blocks from one of my buildings. She arrived tense, but without her usual smirk. "Marcus is surviving," she said, stirring her coffee. "He's working hard. Humble now." "Good." She hesitated. "He asks about you. Wonders if you'll ever forgive him." "I don't know," I admitted. Her eyes dropped. "Marjorie, I owe you an apology. For years I judged you. I assumed you were small, that you needed guidance, that you didn't understand how success worked. And I was cruel about it." Her voice broke. "The truth is, I envied you, even when I mocked you. You had freedom. You didn't need anyone to hold you up. And I hated that because I never felt that way." I stared at her, startled by the honesty. Victoria, for once, wasn't polished or biting. She was just human. "I always thought," she continued softly, "that you were the one who needed saving. Turns out you were the only one who figured it out." I let her words sink in. The cafe hummed around us, waiters moving, cups clinking. For once she wasn't comparing. She wasn't competing. She was just talking to me. And for the first time in our lives, I believed her. We left that cafe on different terms than we'd entered. Not friends, not yet, but sisters in a way we'd never been allowed to be before. Later that night, as I was making tea in my kitchen, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But then I answered. "Hello, Marjorie," a voice said quietly. "Marcus." I almost hung up. Almost. For 2 years I had lived in peace without hearing his voice. And now here it was again, smaller, thinner, worn down by life. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, my tone guarded. He was silent for a beat, as though gathering the courage to speak. "I just wanted to tell you something." My fingers tightened around the mug of tea in my hands. Steam curled upward, ghostly and fragile. "Go on." "I'm leading a training session next week for new property managers, teaching them how to spot investment opportunities, how to recognize a building's potential." His voice caught awkward, almost ashamed, and I realized I learned all of it from you. I didn't reply. "When we were kids," he continued, "you'd talk about neighborhoods, about rent cycles, about why some places were worth saving. I thought you were boring. I laughed at you. But you were brilliant. I was too arrogant to see it." My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, but no words came. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Marcus said quietly. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you. And I'm sorry I had to lose everything to finally understand." There was nothing left to say. He must have known that, because he didn't wait for an answer. "Take care of yourself, Marjorie." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, staring out at the city lights. The skyline glittered with towers. I owned each one, a monument to years of silence, discipline, and resilience. Buildings that nobody in my family ever thought I could claim. They had measured me against Marcus's degrees, Victoria's marriage, Dad's country club. And in their narrow world, I had always come up short. But what they didn't understand, what they never saw, was that silence is not weakness. It's power. And when wielded carefully, patiently, it builds empires. Now finally they knew.